Who do you think you are, Amir Dost Muhammad Khan? In parts of Afghanistan and northwestern Pakistan, a father might say that to his son if he was acting a little too big for his boots, acting like a king. Dost Muhammad Khan lived 200 years ago, but his stature as the byword for an illustrious ruler had a long-lasting resonance. Surviving many dangers in a tempestuous era, he laid the foundations for not only the Barakzai dynasty, but also the state of Afghanistan. With the decay of the Durrani Empire, Afghanistan had a need for a strong ruler that could keep the realm unified. The Dost fit that bill perfectly. For much of his reign, he had to balance dealing with internal discord in his realm, whilst protecting it from outside forces like the capable Sikh armies of Ranjit Singh. Perhaps his greatest victory came in mediating the great game rivalry of Britain and Russia, who both had their own designs for his Emirate. Who was this larger-than-life figure, and what was his story? Dost Muhammad was born in 1792, in the waning years of an Afghan empire created just a few decades before, in 1747 by Ahmad Shah Durrani. It was still a large realm covering most of today's Afghanistan, Pakistan, and parts of Iran. Its emperors proclaimed themselves kings of the world. Dost came from an aristocratic family, the leaders of the Barakzai confederation of Durrani Pashtuns. The Barakzai were one of the most significant powers in the empire among the other Durrani nobility, who filled the ranks of the army and administration. When Dost was less than a year old, his father, Painda Khan, helped the Prince Zaman Shah step over his brothers to become king in May 1793, adding to the power of the Barakzai. Although his family was mighty, it was not clear that Dost Muhammad would be a major power player. Painda Khan apparently favoured Dost's mother, but she was seemingly not a noble and not a Pashtun. She was a Kizilbash, which referred to Shias of Iranian origin in Afghan lands. Moreover, Dost was one of many brothers, and one of the youngest. Still, as a young nobleman, he would have been well trained in warfare, horse riding, poetry, and religious sciences. Dost's fortunes hardly seemed better by the time he was 8 years old, early in his education. In 1800, his powerful father, the former ally of the king, was killed along with several other nobles for plotting Zaman Shah's deposition. Dost's eldest and most influential brother, Fateh Khan, took the lead in seeking to punish their father's killing by joining the fugitive Prince Mahmud Shah in Iran. In 1801, the first of many civil wars to come ended with Zaman Shah's dethronement and blinding by Mahmud Shah. Like Painda Khan had been to Zaman Shah, Fateh Khan would be Mahmud's valued ally. Politics in those days was a family affair, and so Fateh's brothers would also reap the rewards. Very soon, and with their help, the Durrani Empire with the pomp of the Shahs and the far-flung provinces would disintegrate, and something new would have to fill the vacuum. In 1801, no one could guess that the young Dost Muhammad would through skill, force of personality and will, and some luck be the one to truly fill that void. Before that could happen, there were still a few years in which the kingdom tottered along. After a period of deposing and counter-deposing between Mahmud and Zaman Shah's younger brother, Shuja al-Mulk, from 1803 to 1809, Mahmud managed to wear the crown for 9 years until 1818. In that time, as young Dost grew into maturity, Fateh Khan and his Barakzai brothers were building up their power. Fateh was the great wazir or minister and something like the power behind the throne for a fairly ineffective Mahmud. The brothers took major governorships across the land. At this time, Fateh's relationship with his little brother Dost also deepened after Dost's mother was forcibly married to a cousin of his. Fateh Khan took him under his wing. In that time, Dost must have proven his worth, because we find him taking on serious roles in Fateh Khan's expeditions at least twice. First in 1813, he commanded part of the Afghan cavalry against the Sikh kingdom. The Sikhs, under their king Ranjit Singh, were a major military force, encroaching on the Durrani territories. In the fierce battle, Dost nearly broke part of their line in a charge, before the tide turned and the Sikhs routed Fateh Khan's army. Secondly, in 1817, Dost was with Fateh Khan in the western city of Herat. He was sent to requisition assets from a member of the local elite, and he did this viciously. The humiliated victim was part of the Sadozai Durrani clan, and so a relative of the royal family. Once again, politics was all about family, and Dost had to flee royal fury by running off to Kashmir. Not long after the incident in Herat, things turned upside down in the Durrani lands for good. Mahmud Shah and his son Kamran, fearing Fateh Khan's influence, had him brutally blinded, tortured, and eventually killed in 1818. Like with Painda Khan's earlier murder, this pushed the rest of the leading Barakzai family to vengeance. Dost and several of his brothers left their refuge in Kashmir and entered Kabul in 1819, and Dost himself saw of Mahmoud and Kamran's attempt to retake the city. They fled to Herat and were able to hold on to the city. With the governorships they had taken until then, Fateh Khan's brothers found themselves in possession of all the other Durrani territories. Dost had built up some status by now, but he was by no means the leader of the pack. For a while, that position went to Muhammad Azim Khan. Under him, the brothers were relatively united. Some pretense at keeping a Sadozai king as a figurehead was kept. Dost was left to govern Ghazni, not too far south of Kabul. Once, 800 years before, this had been a lavish imperial capital under the Ghaznavid dynasty, but now it was a small town. Brotherly unity did not last. Azim Khan died in 1823 and the others went for each other's throats. In the process, the royal figurehead Ayub Shah was deposed permanently. The chaos also opened up an opportunity for Dost. Being close by in middling Ghazni, he managed to seize Fortune's reins and capture the capital, Kabul. Dost's half-brother Sultan Mohammad, commonly known as Tilai or Golden for his love of sumptuous clothes, was in charge of Peshawar, the old royal winter capital. The Musahibans, the family that would rule Afghanistan from 1930 until 1978, descended from him. Sultan Muhammad paid some tribute to the Sikhs but had ambitions of his own. He tried to take Kabul, but Dost chased him out with the help of his mother's people, the Qizilbash. Dost seemed to have little respect for his older sibling, referring to him as Bibi or Miss Sultan. Far from a young weak player in the Durrani political scene, by 1826, this able and confident Dost was in effective control of Kabul. It would be the linchpin of the new Emirate of Afghanistan. At this point, Dost had to address a fundamental question: on what basis was he ruling? Although the Sadozai dynasty had not lasted all that long, its prestige ran deep. You couldn't just claim to be the Shah by clicking your fingers. It would take some time for Dost to articulate a new vision, something his brothers never did. In the meantime, he secured Ghazni again. He also helped his Barakzai half-brothers who ruled Kandahar by defeating an attempt from Shuja al-Mulk, the former king who had fought Mahmoud to conquer the city in 1834. Despite a much larger army, Shuja was driven off by Dost's counterattack. Still, Shuja's belief in his inalienable right to kingship remained a threat. Another threat was Ranjit Singh, who had hosted Shuja and drawn up a treaty with him. In it, Shuja ceded Peshawar and other Durrani territory formally. On the ground, Singh installed a harsh military government in Peshawar. Sultan Muhammad Tilai and his brothers there kept large estates but were increasingly sidelined in the region's governance. Many Durranis fled to Dost's realm in Kabul. By 1835, with these threats on his doorstep, Dost found a way to define his power. He would be something different to the ostentatious Shahs who claimed to be the kings of the world. Old royal administrative buildings were torn down. Dost wore simple white clothes and walked among the people hearing petitions. Unlike the Durrani emperors, with halos around their crowned heads, he was often depicted in a turban holding prayer beads. He held a modest ceremony, proclaiming himself not king or emperor, but commander of the faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen. This was an old Islamic title given to military leaders by the caliphs in centuries past. With his new self-image as a commander for the Muslims, he first tried to take back Peshawar from the Sikhs by declaring a jihad. He also began issuing coins, the mark of a legitimate ruler. One from 1838 states, Amir Dost Mohammad resolved to wage jihad and to mint coins, may God grant him victory. Ultimately though, his war for Peshawar failed. Both the Afghan and Sikh armies caused devastation for villages in the Peshawar Valley for no gain. 2 years later, in 1837, he made another attempt on Peshawar, spearheaded by his capable son Muhammad Akbar Khan. Like his father back in 1813, Akbar Khan gave a good showing against the Sikhs in the Battle of Jamrud near the Khyber Pass. The fearsome Sikh general Hari Singh Nalwa was killed, but the battle was inconclusive and Dost again failed to take Peshawar. As Afghanistan was sorting out its internal issues, neighbouring India was going through its own radical changes. Long gone were the days of Mughal supremacy. By the 1820s, the Marathas, who had confined the Mughal emperor to Delhi, had themselves been sidelined by the British as the dominant force on the subcontinent. Under the auspices of the East India Company, the British colonial presence in India went from strength to strength, as they created a sprawling bureaucracy and disciplined army that formed the bedrock of their political power. And they were well rewarded for it. India was rich with resources which could help the Brits bankroll their industrialization on the British Isles, as well as their colonial projects overseas. Britain's main competitor in Europe in this period was Russia, which had similar aims of colonial expansion. The Russians had pushed their borders southward into the Caucasus Mountains, but were yet to make forays into Central Asia. Nevertheless, the British still feared Russian designs on India, regardless of their feasibility. There were worries in London that Russia's desire for a warm water port could see it expand its presence towards the Indian Ocean through Persia or Afghanistan, thus bringing them into direct conflict with British interests in India. In such a political atmosphere, Afghanistan became a powder keg for the British, and any Russian interference in the country would be a cause for concern for the Viceroy in India. This rivalry was later dubbed as the Great Game. Of course, the Afghans were not passive bystanders in all of this. Dost Muhammad tried to benefit from the rivalry which threatened his realm by politically maneuvering between the two European powers. He could use the situation to his advantage and try to solicit the return of Peshawar to Afghan control. Considering their proximity to the Sikh Empire, Dost Muhammad preferred to side with the British over the Russians. In 1837, he wrote to Lord Auckland, the British Viceroy of India, proposing an alliance if the British would support his quest to regain Peshawar. Auckland responded with a message that would come back to haunt him, stating, "My friend, you are aware that it is not the practice of the British government to interfere with the affairs of other independent states." In order to placate the Emir, Auckland sent a delegation to Kabul headed by Alexander Burnes. Burnes had previously met the Emir 5 years before on his journey towards Central Asia, and the two got along very well. To the Afghan ruler, Burnes had been given explicit instruction to not agree to any formal alliance. He was in Kabul to try to learn more about the Russian involvement in Afghanistan. With his advances being constantly rejected by Burnes, the Dost started to get frustrated. At the same time, a Russian arrived in Kabul by the name of Jan Vitkovich, who claimed to be an envoy of the Tsar. Oddly enough, Vitkovich was never confirmed to be an official Russian envoy and would later commit suicide under mysterious circumstances. His presence in the Afghan court did, however, terrify the British. Even more so when Vitkovich proposed the establishment of a Russian diplomatic mission stationed in Kabul. In a bid to force the British Viceroy's hand, Dost Mohammad leaked details of the meeting so that he could push the British into granting him the alliance that he wanted. Viceroy Auckland did not like what he heard, especially since his trusted and hawkish advisor, William Hay McNaughton, urged him to take action against Dost Mohammad. The British demanded that Dost Mohammad stop all communication with the Russians. The Afghan ruler asked the viceroy to put the terms in writing and sign a formal alliance, to which he heard no response from India. So he met with Vitkovich again. This was the last straw. Determined to stop Afghanistan from being drawn into the Russian orbit, Viceroy Auckland decided to depose the Dost. The British position was strengthened by the fact that Shah Shuja, a grandson of Ahmad Shah Durrani and a former ruler of Afghanistan, had been living on a British pension in India and was therefore a suitable replacement for Dost Mohammad. In October 1838, the order was given to invade Afghanistan so that Dost Mohammad could be dethroned and Afghanistan could be saved from foreign intervention. The irony was obviously lost on the viceroy. The army of the Indus consisted of just over 30,000 soldiers, with an even greater number of camp followers. Prior to moving on Afghanistan, the British had to deal with the fact that the Sikh Empire lay between it and Dost Muhammad's realm. Thankfully for the British, Ranjit Singh was more than glad to see his old Afghan rival undermined. Therefore, he had no qualms with the invading army of the Indus going through his realm. Passing through the Bolan Pass in March 1839, the British were delighted that the former Afghan capital of Kandahar was taken without a fight the following month. In July, the intimidating fortress of Ghazni was taken when a young British officer named Henry Marion Durand laid satchel charges which blew the gates open. Interestingly enough, his son, Henry Mortimer Durand, would be the person that the famous Durand line would be named after. By August, Dost Muhammad had fled the capital and the British triumphantly entered Kabul with Shah Shuja. Having established him on the throne, the British soon found out that Shah Shuja was a largely incapable ruler. Stories of his brutality became well known. Nonetheless, the Shah's power was limited by MacNaughton, who had accompanied the expedition as Britain's chief representative in Kabul. Burns had also accompanied the mission as MacNaughton's number 2. British garrisons were created in Kandahar, Ghazni, Jalalabad, and of course Kabul. Certain sub-tribes within the Ghilzai Confederacy were paid off by the British to keep the supply lines between Kabul and the Khyber Pass open. For the time being, there seemed to be an eerie sense of acceptance from the Afghans of the new foreign occupiers. This was not lost upon the British, who called for their families to come to Kabul, bringing amenities such as cigars and whiskey with them. The British cantonment in the capital was walled, and a community arose that sought to establish a British way of life inside of it. They had cricket matches, tea parties, and theatre shows. As for Dost Muhammad, he was nowhere to be seen. After his initial escape in 1839, the Dost had fled north to Bukhara, where he was imprisoned by the local ruler. Still a man of action, Dost escaped and carried on fighting. But he was also a man of prudence. During the war, he had even offered to allow Shuja to take power if he could be his wazir. So after winning a small clash at Parwan Dara against some British troops, he voluntarily surrendered on the 2nd of November 1840. Dost was exiled to Calcutta in British India, where he gained the respect of various Brits he encountered as he observed the power of his former foes. He played chess and politely attended the balls of colonial high society. According to the contemporary writer Ata Muhammad Shikarpuri, He was also moved by the kindness the British showed him and saw his exile like that of the Mughal Emperor Humayun in the mid-1500s. Humayun had fled to Safavid Iran and used Safavid help to retake his kingdom. This might be a romantic account of Dost's own opinion, but it would be a prescient comparison. On the back of such a commanding position, British policymakers in London felt that their aims had been achieved in Afghanistan, and there was no point in further draining the Indian treasury. Much of their forces were ordered to withdraw, leaving only a force of 8,000 in Afghanistan. In the summer of 1841, McNaughton had written to a colleague in India that Afghanistan was perfectly quiet. Not everyone in the British camp believed this though. The British commander of the armed forces, Major General Roberts, whose son would play a leading role in the Second Anglo-Afghan War, resigned in protest of the actions taken by the British political administration. He was replaced by the elderly figure of William Elphinstone. The honeymoon period soon unravelled for the British. By 1841, Afghan discontent began to rise to the surface. The general state of security started to decline as robbers and outlaws increased their activities. To confound matters, Wazir Akbar Khan, the capable and charismatic son of Dost Mohammad, soon became a leader of the resistance. He looked to disturb the supply lines and raided roads connecting the cities. As 1841 progressed, there were episodes of attacks on British personnel in the cities as well. The gradual increase in tension and crime was an omen of the future. In a bid to save money, the British payments to the Ghilzai tribesmen for keeping the eastern supply routes open had also been cut. The tribesmen did not take this well and began routine attacks on the British supply lines. Brits inside of Afghanistan were not safe, not even in Kabul. In November 1841, there was an attack on Alexander Burns's residence. In the months before, rumours abounded across Kabul that British soldiers were fraternizing with Afghan women. In such a highly patriarchal society, this was considered absolutely unacceptable by the Afghans. So a crowd gathered outside the house of Burns, who had chosen to live outside the British cantonment. The angry mob wanted to express their disapproval of the foreigners. On that day, however, Burns had been hosting a few local women in his house. The crowd became incensed by this contempt for their culture and became violent. Burns was caught and beaten to death by the angry mob. These developments forced the British leadership in Kabul to realize the danger of the situation. McNaughton reached out to Wazir Akbar Khan in order to negotiate, thinking that the Afghan uprising was under the prince's control. At the same time, he secretly asked the British garrison in Kandahar to come with their forces to Kabul. Somehow, Akbar Khan found out about this plan to double-cross him and ended up killing McNaughton when they met in December. The elderly and ineffective Elphinstone was now in charge of the British in Kabul. He agreed to surrender Kabul to Akbar Khan in return for safe passage to the British garrison in Jalalabad. At the beginning of January 1842, the British evacuated Kabul and set upon their journey eastward. More than 16,000 people, with 4,500 being military personnel and the rest civilians. They had to travel 140 kilometers across the snow-capped Hindu Kush mountains in the midst of the harsh Afghan winter. What the British failed to firmly understand was that the Afghan insurrection was not engineered by or under the control of a single figure. Whilst Akbar Khan was an influential leader, the uprising was a natural outgrowth of Afghan resentment at the British occupation of their country. Therefore, the revolt was far more decentralized and unstructured than the British assumed. As a result, Akbar Khan was never in a position to guarantee the safety of the British journey from Kabul to Jalalabad, because the tribes on that route did not necessarily take their orders from the prince. Over the next week, the local tribes took up positions along the mountain range with their respective long-range Jezayel rifles and intermittently opened fire on the retreating British. Between the tribesmen and the harsh cold weather, the British column was completely wiped out. The episode is often considered as the greatest humiliation faced by the British during the 19th century and has helped Afghanistan gain a reputation as a graveyard of empires. The lone figure of Dr. William Bryden in this painting has popularized the mistaken belief that he was the only survivor from the ordeal, when in reality, several Indian sepoys reached Jalalabad over the coming weeks. Despite this disaster, the British still had garrisons in Kandahar, Ghazni, and Jalalabad. The Afghans were able to take Ghazni, but the Brits held out in Jalalabad and Kandahar, giving them enough time for relief forces to arrive from India in the spring of 1842. By this time, Lord Ellenborough had replaced Lord Auckland as the Viceroy in India, and had been given instructions by London to bring an end to the war in Afghanistan, after punishing the Afghans and reclaiming some lost glory. The already present contingent of British troops inside the country were aided by a relief column referred to as the Army of Retribution, which was instructed to march upon the capital and secure the release of British prisoners taken on the retreat from Kabul. Along the way, the British committed many acts of reprisals against villages and their inhabitants. In September, the historic bazaar of Kabul was burned down. Having exacted their revenge and achieved their revised aims, the British completely withdrew from Afghanistan in October 1842. Shah Shuja had been assassinated earlier in the spring of 1842, and so the position for the ruler of Afghanistan was open. A position which was filled by none other than Dost Mohammad, who was released from captivity by the British at the end of the year and warned against opening up to the Russians again. The Amir returned to Kabul and the powerful Akbar Khan became his wazir. As at other times in his life, Dost had been tenacious, patient, and skilled. Now with British backing in the form of weapons and money, he would build the state of Afghanistan through conquest. In his first reign, Dost had already been called the Great Amir, Amir Kabir, but it was in his second reign that he would secure most of his accomplishments as a ruler. Primarily, this meant welding together most of the territories of modern Afghanistan under one government. He would refer to himself in Persian letters to the British, Farman Farmai Dawlati Afghanistan, the ruler of the state of Afghanistan. This was a violent process involving conquest, repression, torture, and the capture of wealth from individuals like merchants and from whole regions. That process is historically significant as a key step to the formation of Afghanistan in all its complexities. Many of these patterns of violence and repression would continue or escalate after Dost. For several years, Dost's guns were pointed at areas around Kabul, like Bamiyan, the mountainous Kohistan, and parts of the Hazara Jat in central Afghanistan. From 1849, Dost began the conquest of Balkh and the northern territories, which had been loosely incorporated into the Durrani Empire before. His son and deputy there began systematic land surveys, showing the more ambitious nature of this annexation. As we have said before, politics was about family. Sometimes that meant the bonds of family were broken for political gain, something Dost was intimately acquainted with in the tumultuous history of the Durranis. But he was spared a clash with the popular Akbar Khan, his own son, when the latter died of cholera at Kabul in 1847. Now there were few threats to his position. On his eastern border, things also stabilized after some tension. After the invasion of Afghanistan and the death of Ranjit Singh in 1839, British-Sikh relations deteriorated to the point of war in 1845. 3 years later, the British launched a final war with the Sikhs. Dost actually backed his old Sikh enemies, seeing an opening to extend his influence. For a few short months as the Sikh government crumbled, he gained his dream of retaking Peshawar. He even minted coins there. But when the British advanced, he carefully withdrew, his usual boldness tempered with prudence. Peshawar would be forever lost to the rulers of Kabul hereafter. But in 1855, Dost solidified his good relations with the British by making a formal alliance and continuing to take their subsidies. After the treaty with the British, Dost expanded further by taking Kandahar from his Barakzai half-brothers who were still in place there. They had made overtures to Qajar Iran to help them retake the city, which came to nothing. In 1857, when a major rebellion against British rule erupted in India, Dost cannily, or one can say cynically, did not join in, preserving his alliance. The last major principality in the region which was up for grabs was Herat, that old refuge of Mahmoud Shah decades before. Although a Barakzai nephew of Dost's ruled there now, it remained a separate and hostile state. By the end of May 1863, Dost's armies had captured the city after a siege. And just a few days later, on June 9th, Dost died suddenly at the age of 70. He named his son Sher Ali as successor before dying and was buried in Herat, the scene of his final great conquest. By the time of his death, Dost had built up a new and viable kingdom out of the core of the old Durrani Empire, Afghanistan. His realm also had far greater revenues than when he had begun either of his reigns. He had adapted with creativity and finesse to the demands of such a changing world, successfully reimagining himself as the circumstances required, taking and giving ground where needed. He was revered by many of his subjects, but also feared by many others who he terrorized. A young son of many brothers, a minor player in a dangerous political game, had risen to become one of the defining personalities of Afghan, Central and South Asian history. Not to mention, he forged his Afghan state during the bloody transition into a world dominated by the European colonial powers. Although that state has suffered a great deal up to today, the idea of it has survived many blows from inside and outside. Thank you guys for watching. I want to give a massive shout out to Timur Khan from the University of Leiden. His help during the writing of this script was invaluable. If you guys are interested in Pashtun history in the 18th and 19th century, please check out his academia profile. I've put the link in the description below. As usual, a big thank you to my patrons for continuing to support the channel. Until next time, peace!